Close your eyes. Imagine standing atop a crumbling wall, beneath a black sky crackling with cannon fire. Below you, the last defenders of Rome fight like ghosts, outnumbered, outgunned, but unbroken. In the distance, the silver dome of Hagia Sophia gleams one final time under the moonlight before the world shatters. This is not just the fall of a city, it's the death of an era. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople had stood unyielding, a bridge between East and West, a fortress of faith, a crown without rival. Emperors, crusaders, and sultans had all tried to take her. All had failed, until now. In 1453, a 19-year-old sultan with a vision and a monster-sized cannon would do what no army ever could. He would end an empire and begin another. This is not a story of siege engines and swords. This is about destiny, ambition, betrayal, and the final heartbeat of a world that thought itself eternal. This is the fall of Constantinople, and nothing would ever be the same again. What if the heart of an empire kept beating, long after the body had turned to dust? By 1453, the Byzantine Empire was an empire in name only. It ruled little more than the city of Constantinople and a few scattered outposts. The streets that once echoed with the triumphs of Justinian and Basil now whispered only hunger, dust, and resignation. Yet within these ancient walls, the illusion of empire still flickered. Constantinople remained magnificent in decay. Hagia Sophia still crowned the skyline. Its domes, though cracked, gleamed at sunrise. Its mosaics, though faded, shimmered like ghosts of saints. Monks still chanted, bells still rang. Empire moved like a ghost, hollow and proud. But outside the gates, the world had moved on. The Ottomans had seized nearly everything else. Thrace, Macedonia, Anatolia. The empire's limbs had been amputated one by one. Constantinople was a lone fortress suspended between two continents, a relic that refused to die. At its helm stood Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last Roman emperor, a man born into ruins, hardened by war, and fated to make his final stand. He wasn't a ruler of splendor, he was a commander without reinforcements, an emperor without an empire. Still, he fought. He inspected walls with his own hands. He rationed food with the people. He prayed not for victory, but for dignity. And every night he gazed east toward the enemy campfires that now surrounded his city like stars fallen to earth. The West watched and did nothing. Venice delayed. Rome hesitated. The so-called guardians of Christendom turned away, unwilling to bleed for a dying city. Constantinople was on its own. The final act of a 1,000-year-old story had begun, and the curtain was rising over a city that had survived Persians, Arabs, Crusaders, and now faced its deadliest enemy yet, a boy sultan with fire in his veins and empire on his mind. He was just 19, but he saw himself as Caesar reborn. Sultan Mehmed II had been mocked as a boy, too young, too arrogant, too obsessed with maps and prophecy. But behind that sharp gaze burned something the world hadn't seen in centuries, a vision to reshape history. He didn't just want to conquer Constantinople, he wanted to erase the line between legend and legacy. Raised in the court of Edirne, Mehmed devoured classical texts. He studied Alexander, Caesar, Hannibal, and dreamed of outdoing them all. Constantinople wasn't just a city to him. It was the missing piece, the hinge of worlds, the symbol of true empire. Whoever held it ruled the age, and he would take it or die trying. As soon as he came to power in 1451, he moved with terrifying speed. He signed false peace with the Byzantines, then began building Rumeli Hisar, a fortress directly across the Bosphorus, staring down Constantinople like a loaded gun. Stone by stone, he tightened the noose. He summoned Orban, a Hungarian engineer, to craft something monstrous. A cannon so large it shook the earth. The basilica, a 9-meter bronze giant, could fire stone balls the size of oxen. It would crack the walls once believed eternal. Meanwhile, Mehmed assembled a massive army, by some accounts over 80,000 men, from Anatolia, the Balkans, even mercenaries. He forged alliances with pirates to blockade the city by sea. Every wall, every gate, every harbor, scouted, mapped, prepared for annihilation. This was not the campaign of a reckless youth. This was precision. This was legacy in the making. In secret, he even visited the city walls in disguise, riding close enough to inspect their cracks. He wasn't preparing for a siege, he was rehearsing history. While the West debated theology and politics, Mehmed prepared to make the world remember his name. And in his mind, it was already carved in marble above the gates of Constantinople. On April 6, 1453, the drums began. Mehmed's army had arrived. Tens of thousands of men, stretched across the hills like a living wall. Janissaries in perfect formation. Siege towers, trebuchets, camel trains hauling supplies. And in the center, half buried in earthworks like a sleeping god, the basilica cannon. The Ottomans surrounded Constantinople by land and sea. To the north and south, siege lines were dug in. To the east, Ottoman ships patrolled the Bosphorus, cutting off food and reinforcements. The defenders were alone, just 7,000 men, including Genoese mercenaries, monks, and peasants. The odds were nearly 10 to 1, but inside the walls, faith didn't crack. Constantine XI rallied the people. Churches rang out with chants. Icons were paraded through the streets. The emperor declared he would die with sword in hand, not crown on head. This wasn't just a defense, it was a funeral pact. Then came the first thunder. The basilica roared. Its stone shot shattered the earth, echoed across continents. Chunks of wall flew into the sky like broken history. Day after day the cannon fired, and still, the Theodosian walls held. 3 layers of defense built 1,000 years earlier, resisting modern hellfire. At sea, Mehmed faced humiliation. The Byzantine chain stretched across the Golden Horn blocked his ships from entering. And when 3 Genoese supply ships broke through the Ottoman blockade and entered the harbor unharmed, the Sultan exploded with fury. So he did the unthinkable. He ordered ships dragged over land, over hills, on greased logs, around the chain, and back into the water behind enemy lines. One morning, the Byzantines awoke to see an Ottoman navy inside their harbor. Panic surged, hope cracked. By night, bricks replaced bones. Men patched walls with splinters in their palms. Prayer sounded more like breathing than faith. The siege had begun, and time was running out, for both sides. They were more than stone. They were legend carved into limestone. The walls of Theodosius had guarded Constantinople for over 1,000 years. 3 massive layers, a moat, an outer wall, and an inner wall thick enough for chariots. 30 feet high, 60 towers. Engineers of the ancient world had built them not just for defense, but for defiance. And defy they did. Arab caliphs, Bulgarian khans, Persian shahs, and crusader kings had all tried. None had broken through by force. Only betrayal had ever opened these gates. Now Ottoman cannons fired day and night. The basilica launched stone balls weighing half a ton. Entire sections of wall collapsed in thunder. But every night the defenders rebuilt them, with brick, timber, debris, even the dead. Constantinople didn't sleep. It clawed its way into legend with blood and mortar. At the center of the defense stood Giovanni Giustiniani, a Genoese mercenary captain. Professional, cold, unshakable. With his 700 heavily armed men, he fortified weak points, led countercharges, and kept panic from turning into collapse. Where he stood, the walls held. By his side was Constantine XI, the last Roman emperor, not in robes but in armor. He refused luxury, refused retreat. He ate what soldiers ate. He patched walls himself. And when morale cracked, he climbed the ramparts and reminded his men, "We are all Romans here. We fight as one." The worst came at Blockerney, where the old triple wall system narrowed. Cannon fire tore massive gaps. Ottomans surged forward. Still, the Byzantines repelled them. Still, they rebuilt. But then the blow came. On the morning of May 29th, during the final assault, Giustiniani was hit, wounded in the chest, carried away bleeding. His men hesitated. The line wavered. Without their captain, the western section began to collapse. Constantine did not flee. He tore off imperial insignia and threw himself into the melee. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. The walls had kept the world out for a millennium. Now they were tombstones. The end came in darkness. In the early hours of May 29th, 1453, beneath a moonless sky, Mehmed gave the order. 3 waves, no retreat. The first were irregulars, poorly armed, expendable. Sent to wear down the defenders, expose arrow fire, trigger traps. They climbed over corpses, howling prayers or curses, dying by the hundreds. But they forced the Byzantines to spend precious strength. Next came the Anatolian regiments, trained, disciplined, relentless. They attacked the breaches at Blockerney and St. Romanus Gate, hammering the weakened walls. The defenders fought like men possessed, hurling rocks, fire, bolts, anything that killed. Then came silence. And then came the Janissaries. Tall, silent, armored in black. Mehmed's elite. He held them back until the moment was perfect, when the walls were bleeding and the defenders gasping. Now they advanced with terrifying precision. Inside the city, Giustiniani was gone. The western flank was crumbling. Constantine ran from post to post, rallying whoever still held a blade. Clergy brought icons to the walls. Monks handed swords to boys. The bells of Hagia Sophia tolled for the last time. Then the gate broke. At Kirkoporta, a small postern door left ajar by mistake, Ottoman troops poured in. Panic exploded, the line shattered. Mehmed's men swarmed into the city like a flood. Constantine refused to flee. He tore off his purple cloak, shouted, "The city is lost, but I live!" and plunged into the chaos. No one saw him fall. No body was ever found. The last Roman died nameless, sword in hand. By midday, the city was burning. Smoke curled over shattered domes. Hagia Sophia was stormed. Priests chanting liturgy were cut down. The screams bled into the smoke, high, human, unforgotten. Mehmed entered the city in silence. He rode to Hagia Sophia, dismounted, and walked into the great cathedral. He did not speak. He simply bent down, scooped up a handful of dust, and whispered, "The city is mine." By nightfall, an empire was gone. By dawn, another had taken its place. The sack of Constantinople lasted 3 days. 3 days of fire, steel, and screaming. Churches became stables. Children were dragged from crypts. Priceless manuscripts burned in alleyways, their pages curling into smoke. Survivors, those not killed or chained, hid in basements clinging to icons in silence. But then Mehmed gave the order. Enough. He rode through the shattered gates not as a barbarian, but as a sovereign. He entered Hagia Sophia, once the beating heart of Orthodox Christendom, and stood beneath its vast dome. His boots crushed broken marble. Light streamed through stained glass now cracked by cannon shock. He bent down, scooped a handful of earth, and whispered, "The city is mine." But what he wanted wasn't rubble. It was rebirth. He declared Constantinople the new Ottoman capital. Not simply a trophy, but a throne. He took the title Caesar I Rum, Caesar of Rome, and meant it. This was no symbolic flourish. It was a claim to imperial succession, backed by conquest and ambition. Then he began to build. He reopened the markets, repaired aqueducts, summoned architects from Persia, masons from the Balkans, and scholars from Cairo. The call went out. Jews, Greeks, Armenians, Christians, return, resettle, rebuild. He ordered mosques, but also restored baths, bridges, and schools. Istanbul would not be a monument to war. It would be a capital of civilization. Mehmed read Homer and Plutarch, hired Italian artists to paint his portrait, sponsored translations of Greek philosophy. He wasn't just absorbing Constantinople, he was distilling Rome into something new. He fused East and West, past and future. He built an empire not only on swords, but on stories. The world took notice. Venice recalculated. The Pope panicked. Eastern princes sent embassies draped in silk. A new world order had just walked through a ruined gate and claimed the throne of 2 continents. The Ottomans hadn't just ended Byzantium. They had inherited its ghost and given it a new name. Not with crosses, but with crescents. Smoke still curled above shattered domes, and already history had moved on. The city was ash, but from that ash something began to stir, not in Istanbul, but far to the west. In the weeks that followed the fall, a silent exodus began. Dozens of Greek scholars, scribes, and monks slipped aboard Venetian, Genoese, and Ragusan ships. They carried no gold, only books, manuscripts, scrolls, knowledge, Plato, Ptolemy, Euclid, Galen, Homer. The wisdom of 1,000 years rescued page by page. These scholars fled to Italy, Florence, Venice, Rome, where hungry minds waited. One of them, a man named Plethon, would reawaken Europe's love for Plato. Another, Cardinal Bessarion, would help spark the flame that became the Renaissance. In Florence, Cosimo de' Medici began funding translations. By 1455, Gutenberg's press clicked out the first printed Greek grammar. Artists like Brunelleschi, inspired by Hagia Sophia's dome, would reshape European skylines. Astronomers armed with old manuscripts would soon challenge everything, including Earth's place in the universe. The light of Byzantium didn't vanish, it scattered, and in scattering it ignited something far more explosive. Meanwhile, in the East, Mehmed built his empire, not just on conquest, but on ideas. He preserved ancient texts, opened observatories, sponsored poets. The same man who shattered Constantinople now gave shelter to Greek philosophy and Persian art. 2 worlds had collided, and from their collision the modern age had begun. But something deeper had died. With the fall of Constantinople, the last living link to ancient Rome was severed. The empire that had begun with Augustus and marched through Caesars, crusades, and councils was finally gone. No more purple cloaks. No more emperors crowned in Hagia Sophia. The dream of Rome, of a Christian empire uniting East and West, was buried beneath the rubble, but not forgotten. Its echo lived on in Orthodox liturgy, in Russian czars who called themselves Third Rome, in frescoes, in domes, in myths, and in the ruins of a world that thought stone could outlive time. History does not always belong to the victors. Sometimes it belongs to those who dared to believe it would never end.